What's up guys, Will here for GSM Arena. When looking at this year's iPhones, the 12 Pro Max is the highest tier model you can get. What does this phone have that the others don't? And is it worth spending the extra cash for the Pro Max? Let's find out in our full review. The iPhone 12 Pro Max is like an upscaled version of the iPhone 12 Pro, with a bigger display and battery, but it also has an improved camera setup. It's also one of the most expensive phones you can buy these days. The Pro Max is made of frosted Gorilla Glass 6 on the back. And just like the other iPhone 12 models, it has a solid ceramic shield glass protecting the display that's scratch and shatter resistant. And of course, the whole device is IP68 rated for water resistance too, up to 6 meters underwater. A stainless steel frame holds everything together, and it has a glossy finish that doesn't provide a whole lot of grip. That plus the phone's size and heft make it not really ideal for one-handed use. This screen is larger than last year's Pro Max. It's a 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED, with a pixel density of 458 ppi. It still brings a standard 60Hz refresh rate though. And up at the top is again a wide notch cutout for the selfie cam and 3D scanner. While it is a bit of an eyesore, it's not quite as offensive on this larger screen as it is on the smaller iPhones. This display is a really nice one regardless. Blacks are quite deep thanks to OLED technology, and color accuracy is excellent. You get true tone automatic white balance adjustments based on ambient lighting, and maximum brightness is really good. We measured 822 nits. Using the Pro Max outdoors in the sun is a breeze. For audio, the iPhone 12 Pro Max has a pair of stereo speakers, a hybrid setup with one speaker at the bottom and the earpiece acting as the second one. Just like the iPhone 12 Pro, the 12 Pro Max scored a very good mark in our loudness test, but the audio quality here is the best of this year's iPhones. It has the deepest bass and the richest midtones, and the high notes are well presented too. This year's iPhones don't use a fingerprint scanner for biometrics, but instead use Face ID recognition to wake up and unlock the phone. It's super fast, reliable, and secure, but your face has to be visible to the camera and 3D scanner for it to work, so no face masks. For storage, the iPhone 12 Pro Max has either 128, 256, or 512 gigs on board, which should be plenty. It's not expandable though. All of the new iPhones come with the latest version of iOS 14, which is also rolled out to older iPhones as well. One of the most notable features you'll find on iOS 14 is that the home screen supports widgets now, which you can stack to save space. And like Android's app drawer, iOS has an app library. When you install your apps, they'll be found here, and they're automatically sorted into categories. Picture-in-picture mode lets you minimize a supported app into a floating window, so you can multitask while keeping an eye on a video you're watching, for example. And you can assign functions to a couple of new shortcuts, which you'll access by double or triple tapping on the back of the phone. Quite handy. One of the major upgrades you'll find in the new iPhones is a new chipset, Apple's A14 Bionic, which is built on a 5nm process. In benchmarks, the iPhone 12 Pro Max beats last year's model quite handily, scoring about 20% higher in CPU tests. GPU scores aren't quite as dramatic an improvement, but they still come out on top here. Overall, these are some of the best numbers we've seen. And in addition, since there's a Qualcomm 5G modem on board, you get access to 5G network speeds as well. And what's even better is that unlike the smaller iPhone 12s, especially the Mini, the Pro Max does a good job as far as thermals go. Though it does get warm, we didn't notice any thermal throttling, with prolonged sessions of benchmarking or gaming. The iPhone 12 Pro Max also has 6 gigs of RAM, rather than 4, and this helps it handle one of its more interesting features, its LiDAR scanning technology, which you will also find on the iPad Pro and the iPhone 12 Pro. The phone's LiDAR scanner repeatedly fires a laser and measures its reflections with a dedicated sensor to calculate distances. Unlike a regular TOF camera you'd find on other phones, LiDAR gathers a bunch of points to map out complex surfaces in 3D space. This is useful for augmented reality and measurement apps, as well as for more accurate camera portraits. Now on to battery life. The Pro Max is powered by a 3678 mAh battery, the largest capacity among this year's iPhones. It did a great job in our proprietary battery tests, scoring an endurance rating of 95 hours. The Pro Max supports fast USB power delivery charging, but there's no charger included in the box this year. With an Apple 20-watt charger, we were able to take the battery from 0 to 55% charge in half an hour. This year's iPhones bring support for something called MagSafe. You can attach certain magnetic accessories to the back of the phone. This includes things like wallets, as well as the MagSafe wireless charger. It's kind of neat how the magnetic charger snaps onto the back of the phone, but we weren't impressed with its charging speed. It was only able to charge from 0 to 28% in half an hour. Now on to the iPhone 12 Pro Max's 12-megapixel triple camera setup, which offers some upgrades over the likes of the 12 Pro. While the ultra-wide cam is the same, the main camera has a much larger sensor here, with sensor shift stabilization rather than OIS. And the telephoto camera, with OIS, has a longer range 2.5 times optical zoom. Let's start off with daylight photos from the main cam. These are good, with high contrast, low noise, accurate white balance, and realistic colors. Dynamic range is wide, yet natural looking. However, if you were expecting something much better than the other iPhone 12s here, in these situations the results are pretty much identical. This includes the issues we found with the rendering of fine details. The overall detail level is nice, but complex things like foliage, grass, and window blinds appear smeared and over-sharpened when you look closely. Photos from the ultra-wide camera are excellent, with a super wide field of view and nice distortion correction. You get great contrast, accurate colors, and reasonably wide dynamic range. The detail level is decent too, but foliage is again a challenge. The 2.5 times zoomed photos from the telephoto camera are superb. You get high contrast, spot-on colors, and well-balanced dynamic range. You get plenty of resolved detail too, and while the foliage can be hit or miss, the problem spots are not as apparent as on the main camera. Portraits on the Pro Max are something special thanks to the LiDAR scanner's depth mapping. They're shot with a telephoto cam by default, and they are excellent, with great detail, contrast, and colors. The subject separation is spot on, and the defocus backgrounds are pleasant too. Now on to low light shooting. Night mode triggers automatically in low light scenes, and works even faster here than on the 12 Pro. You hold the camera still for just 1 second, and these shots from the main cam are admirable. They're detailed, with low noise, balanced exposure, and
12 Pro Max dropping at the same time, opposite ends of the spectrum. So yes, I am dropping 2 videos at the same time. This one is all about the Pro Max, and I'll link below the video about the Mini if you want to check that out too. So the Pro Max is the everything phone. It's the biggest, it's the most Apple has to offer. Fun fact, even the sticker in the Pro Max box is the biggest of any iPhone box. But also now, interestingly, in the past, iPhones have all just typically been the same thing across the board, but different sizes. Maybe an extra camera in the Pro. This year, there's an entirely new, different, special camera system in just the Pro Max. That's not in any of the other new iPhones. So naturally, this was the focus of my testing. That's a pun. So I think all the other benefits of a bigger iPhone sort of speak for themselves, right? The display is a slightly higher resolution, and it's of course now a 6.7-inch screen instead of the 6.5-inch from last year's Max. So this is the biggest canvas of a screen Apple's ever put in a phone. I would have really liked for them to make it high refresh rate, but again, in the reviews, I talked about why it's not there, most likely battery, but in every other metric, this is a top-of-the-line excellent smartphone display. But also, speaking of battery, the iPhone 12 Pro Max does have the biggest battery in any of the new iPhones. And yes, it does last noticeably longer. First of all, it has an incredible standby time. And I've typically ended days with it around 25% with 6, maybe 7 hours of screen on time sometimes. So if you're looking for the iPhone with the best battery, this is definitely it. It's comparable to the 11 Pro Max, I would say maybe just a tiny bit less. Then also, the biggest iPhone does technically also get the biggest speaker. If you look at the bottom of all these phones, the 12 Pro Max has a bigger grill than the others, but honestly, it's not a noticeably louder speaker at all. Really, I just found it has slightly bassier sound at the highest volumes. That's about it. And the biggest iPhone also will of course have the biggest viewing area, and also because it's the same size notch on a bigger screen, the notch kind of feels maybe a tiny bit smaller, even though it is still comically big compared to other phones. But this is at least a no-brainer of a choice of an iPhone if people want to watch videos, do a lot of typing, a lot of texting, a lot of photo editing, big screen stuff like that. If you're not used to the size of this bigger iPhone, it's gonna feel huge. Like the toughest thing is, you'll notice right from the start, reachability is kind of tough. You can't reach all 4 corners of this phone with one hand like you can with the Mini, for example, But other than that, I have no problems with it. Also, side note, this is my first time using the gold iPhone, and sheesh, this is a shiny gold outside rail. The back of the phone actually isn't that gold. It's more of kind of like an off-white sand color with the matte finish. And then the rings around the camera and the stainless steel sides are the really gold part. But they're still gonna collect fingerprints like crazy. Honestly, it's not the color I would pick, but they don't have like a matte black Pro iPhone this year, so I guess I could just pick any color and then grab a dbrand skin literally just for the side rails. Did you know you could do that? Yeah, just matte black for the shiny sides and all my complaints are solved. So I'll drop a link below if you want to do the same thing. Shout out to dbrand for being a channel sponsor. But enough of that. What you're probably here for is this camera, right? The question is this new camera system on the 12 Pro Max worth like spending the extra money and getting it over the 12 or the 12 Pro? If you're a creator, if you're a pro. No. So first of all, okay, I just want to point out it really is a physically larger camera module. Like the rounded circle that the cameras live on is bigger, and the camera rings and lenses themselves are all also bigger. And that's to house the new hardware inside, namely the 47% larger main camera sensor that now has sensor shift stabilization instead of lens-based stabilization. And there's also a new 2.5x telephoto lens. So that's huge, literally. Like a physically larger sensor plus better stabilization just screams like way better light gathering ability. So I'd be looking for improvements, not just in regular everyday photos and normal situations, but especially in lower light when you need to maximize light gathering. So ideally you see better night mode performance. You see maybe even not having to kick into night mode as often because it's gathering so much light, and maybe even not having to hold the phone still for as long when you do have to kick into night mode. But I found none of these things to actually be true. Now trust me, I really wanted to see a difference. Like this is the one with the actually new camera hardware. This is the first big jump for the iPhone in a little while with the cameras. With the bigger sensor, I was hoping maybe to see some more natural depth or some more of that bigger sensor look that photographers know to look for. And I didn't see much of that. To be honest, you could already get a solid amount of natural bokeh without portrait mode on plenty of smartphone cameras, including other iPhones. This one's no different. Still takes great photos and videos with smart HDR. Still does all the typical iPhone computational photography. All that's great. I'm just not seeing much of a difference versus the other new iPhone 12s. So at this point, I'm like, all right, maybe to see the difference, I just got to put it side by side. Like most people won't do that. And that's actually a telltale sign of a feature that probably regular people won't notice, is if you have to put it side by side with something else to even see it in the first place. But I want to see the difference. I'm testing them. I'm testing the Mini at the same time. So I'm going around with both the 12 Pro Max and the 12 Mini, taking photos side by side. And when I tell you I couldn't see much of a difference, I mean, seriously, you're seeing the results here for yourself. I did back-to-back photo testing in regular light and even much more here in lower light, where I was expecting to see the bigger sensor and better stabilization shine and show me a difference. And believe it or not, I just didn't. So the only really noticeable stuff I can point to between the Mini and the Pro Max seems to be slightly better edge sharpness in some of those wider landscape type shots. But in the dark, I didn't see any noticeably lower noise levels. I didn't see any shorter night mode stabilization times. I didn't see much of the better quality in low light shots I was hoping to. Now again, let's not forget, it is still really impressive photography in this low light and in regular light. It really speaks to, I guess, how good the computational photography in iPhones has gotten over the years, more than anything bad about the Pro Max phone. By the way, it also doesn't fix any of the haloing, sort of glowing orbs you see in nighttime videography. They still show up pretty much anytime there's a point light in the scene in low light video, something I noticed when I first started testing the 12s. So, all right, the main camera, I've tested it. It's physically different, yes, but the results are very difficult to see any differences with. I'm glad I tested it. But we can't forget there's also a second telephoto lens. There's the 2.5x instead of 2x. So my photographer friends out there, that's about a 65 millimeter equivalent instead of 52 millimeters. It's not a dramatic difference, as you may have guessed. But yeah, it's right there now. Now there's a 2.5x button in the camera now. And the final maximum allowed zoom in camera is 12x instead of the usual 5 or 10x. Yeah, it didn't make a massive difference for me. Really what I actually noticed more is getting locked into 2.5x or 1x for portrait mode shots, because regular iPhone 12 Pro does portrait mode at 1x and 2x. So this one punching in a little bit further, starting to get a little bit further away, but I still stick with 1x for portrait mode when I can. So yeah, I guess the story is Apple finally made a jump in hardware and nothing really happened. Not much happened.